So hello and welcome to Steps to Maths. In this short introductory video, I'd like to introduce you to some of the ideas about what secondary level maths is about. What's different compared to primary school? So at primary level, you're looking at operations on specific numbers. So you're asked, for example, what is 7 plus 3? You're asked what 19 minus 2 is, or you're asked how to multiply two specific numbers together, or how to divide certain numbers. Okay, you're also asked about real life problems involving numbers, where you're told what the numbers are and you're asked to figure out a particular solution. Now, at the secondary level, we're still looking at operations on numbers, but we're also looking at patterns and thinking about operations on numbers in general. So what this means is, instead of saying, if I add 13 to 7, I'm asking myself, if I add one number to another number, what do I get? I'm asking myself, what type of fractions can I add together? I'm asking myself, how do I multiply two numbers together? So at the primary level, we might have a real life problem saying Mary woke up at 6 a.m. and 2 hours later she went to school. If you're asking operations on numbers in general, you might say Mary woke up at a specific time and went to school 2 hours later. So far so good. But then we might ask ourselves the question, if Mary woke up at a certain time, how much earlier would she have woken up for it to be the previous day? So we're beginning to think in numbers in general, and we're beginning to look at patterns. So at the primary level, again, to say what we're looking at, we're being specific and we're counting things that are the same. So we're counting, let's say, 3 apples and 4 apples. And we need to count things that are the same. So this is an idea that I'd like to keep in your head all the way through second level as well, that when you add or count things, they need to be the same. Okay, so this is an issue that crops up a lot. You need to remember that you count things that are the same. If I have 3 apples and 4 oranges, I cannot add them together. However, I might be able to say if I have 3 pieces of fruit and 4 pieces of a different fruit, I have a total of 7 pieces of fruit. Similarly with money, similarly with time, and similarly with fractions, we have to add euro to euro rather than euro to cents. We have to add hours to hours and not hours to minutes. We need to be careful about what we're counting. But basically at the primary level, we're counting things that are the same and we're given those specific numbers. Again, at the secondary level, we're still basically counting things that are the same, but we're asking ourselves the question, is this true for every number, or could it be true for any given number? So we ask ourselves, in the primary level, if I get 8 and divide by 2, do I get a whole number? At secondary level, we ask ourselves the question, if I divide any number by 2, will I always get a whole number? Which you probably know now is not actually true. But we can also ask a question, if I have any number and divide by any other number, will I always get a fraction? And this may not be true. So we discover new things at secondary level when we're looking at patterns and we're looking at the general numbers. So let's talk about how we look at patterns. We're asking ourselves the question, we look at a particular sequence of things that are happening and we ask ourselves what will happen next. We also try to figure out, how do I add up all the things that have happened in the sequence and how will I add them up into the future? So we're starting to ask ourselves the question about, how do I use the information that I have to predict what might happen later? We're also asking ourselves, how do I use the knowledge that I've learned at primary level and ask, how is this true in general? So for example, at a primary level of thinking about science or engineering, we might say, if I add up 20 blocks, will that stand up? The question we might ask ourselves at secondary level then is, how many blocks can I add up before they fall over? So we're looking at patterns and we're thinking about things in a more general way. So this allows us to take the knowledge that we have and expand it and look at the world in a better way to understand it and a better way to apply our knowledge in a way that can be shared and in a way that allows knowledge to grow. Also, we start to get really exact about what we are saying. So for example, you often find in the media, you find people saying something like fat is bad for you. In maths and in science in general, we like to ask a very specific question or give a very specific answer. So we might say certain types of fats are bad for certain types of people in certain circumstances, which is saying something quite different. So at the secondary level, we have to learn to understand why that's different, how patterns work, and how we extend patterns to ask questions about other things. So for example, if I find out that 20% of the people in my class like a particular film, I can ask myself, is that true of everybody in my country? So we need to look at patterns to try and figure out if these things are true. Are these things true in general? Can this be applied to everybody? Could it be applied to, is it true for anybody or any one specific situation? So that's the difference between primary and secondary. At primary level, we're answering particular questions about particular things. At secondary level, we are still answering particular questions about particular things, but we're also asking ourselves questions in general. Is this generally true? How can I apply my knowledge that I've learned to a different situation? So it allows us to take our maths and science and allows us to apply it at a level that allows us to become architects and engineers.